What is it about sport that makes it so useful in promoting peace, in promoting dialogue? Prince Faisal, you mentioned that sport should be used as a multifaceted and universal language. Why did you choose sport as a tool to build peace? And Dr. Cronin, you mentioned in your case, in Arlen's case, sport was a force that united but also, in a way, drove people apart as well. So what makes it so useful in promoting peace as well? If you can share your two experiences first, and then I'll continue with some other questions.
Sports is a universal language, which makes it so easy to be able to implement anywhere in the world. And in particular, when we're looking at peace building and focusing on children and youth, I don't care what part of the world you come from, you put a ball in front of kids, they're going to start kicking around. You don't need to explain them what to do. They'll immediately start to learn how to play. And I think it's every child's expectation to be able to play, and it should be their right to be able to play. So I think when you're using something that's so basic as a human characteristics from which you can build upon, it makes it so much easier. We get so many life lessons from sports, whether it's respect for other players, respect for the rules, teamwork. There's so much more into it that you can learn from, and so it makes a very natural focus point for bringing kids in. Every kid wants to play. Kids wants to have fun, and sports can provide that. So it's a natural way of being able to bring kids in to do something that I think we're all have built in us, is the love to play. And so that's what makes it so powerful and so universal. And I think that's why it's so effective in being able to teach the right life lessons and to be used as a tool for peace.
Yeah, I think the one thing about the universality, when you think about the Soccer World Cup this last year, 2/3 of the world's planet watched the same game. Now, there's nothing that we do on this planet where 2/3 of it are doing it at the same time. So I think it's that universal appeal is absolutely critical, that there's pretty much nowhere in the world where people aren't playing. I mean, that's the key thing. I mean, there's one thing about elite sport, but the idea that wherever you are in the globe, no matter what the social economic circumstances are, people will come together to play a game, to watch a game, etc. And that's different from even, forms like entertainment. For all the power, the global power of Hollywood, for example, there are endless regions where cinema isn't a thing, or there is a national or regional equivalent because of language. Other things break down that force of globalism, whereas sport doesn't have that linguistic problem. And I think the other thing as well is, as His Royal Highness was just saying, I do think one thing that's critical is the fact that sport as an activity has an ethical code. It's also active. And again, I think when we think about the idea, there's lots on this table, there's lots down there. We all have our phones, we all have our devices, we have our social media. We have this idea of connectivity, but connectivity is passive. That we live in a digital age, most of which is about consumption. Doing sport is active. Doing sport involves that very old-fashioned thing of actually communing with other people using your voice rather than using your thumb and your fingers. And I think it's those kind of critical differences. It's one of the last repositories of genuine human interaction, which doesn't involve a digital space if you're playing. It doesn't involve a pub or a bar or food. It doesn't involve, most times, kind of religious identity or politics. It just means watching the game. And I always remember an American colleague of mine, when he wrote a book, and I think he summed it up beautifully. He said, what is the most common question, if you're in an elevator in a hotel like this one, that we all understand? Who won the game? Now, we might have a discussion about which game are we talking about, but we all understand the question that somewhere in the world, whether it's a World Series, whether it's a Premier League, whether it's the Olympics, there is a game that we're all plugged into. And I think also, very quickly to finish, the ethical code's important, that most of our activities don't come with meaning. So again, We can all go down to the cinema tonight or sit in front of Netflix and watch the same film. We can be engaged, we can be passive, we can fall asleep, we can talk about it. But it doesn't come with any, as it were, meaning given to us by the film itself. Whereas when we watch sport, I have a 10-year-old son. I sit and watch English Premier League football at the weekend, and I watch players diving around and referees blowing their whistles. But that critical moment, and it is critical, we have an activity that's been running in its modern form for over a century. At the end of the game, everybody shakes hands. Very simple idea. And I watch my son do it on a Saturday morning when he plays his soccer game. They all line up and they shake hands. And the players doing the World Series do it. Children in your projects do it. It's the idea at the end of it we treat each other with respect and decency. Whether it was an own goal, whether it was a penalty, who fouled who, that's all gone. And I think sport is critical in terms of peace building. It's an activity for all the passion, for all the competition. You shake hands at the end of it, you've enjoyed the experience, and then you move on with the rest of your life.
I can undersign everything what Prince Faisal bin Hussein said and what you said, Mike. And of course, when I'm involved in campaigns in Germany, I also stress the opportunities of sport, etc., etc. But we must also be aware of the fact that there are strong forces which have the opposite effect on young people. And you mentioned television, you know. The young ones also see the bad behavior of players. They see how they discuss or even are against decision of the referee, etc. With how many tricks they work and so on. And that is, I do not mention the fact that even by chauvinism and nationalism, we had already a war in America, as you remember, yeah, as a result of a national football match. So the question is, how can we be so strong to how would you call it, to avoid the effect of the mass media? This is, in my opinion, and the mass media are stronger than ever before.
Mass media, you mentioned Netflix, you mentioned phones growing in popularity across the world now, probably in more and more areas around the world as well. Is it also becoming a challenge to reach out to youth through sports and gain them away from their devices? Is it becoming more of a challenge to bring them into sport? I know that it's been a challenge for the IOC to even get the youth interested in the Olympic Games. So is that another challenge facing maybe sports administrators or people trying to use the power of sports to promote education, to promote peace?
In terms of time, we all have time pressures. But I also think it's a social economic problem that, if to use an old-fashioned term, if you think about the Western world or the developed world, what are children supposed to do? Well, they're supposed to do as much sport as possible. You know, that children go from, in my country, they go from rugby at 9 o'clock to soccer at 10 o'clock to GA at 11 o'clock. And they probably do a dance class and learn a language as well before they go to bed. It's crazy. And then they've also got their devices, and they've got Netflix, and they've got X Factor, and whatever else is going on in their life. And I do think that kind of time pressure to get the most from young people is crippling, because I think sometimes sport is just an activity which is a tick box. It's almost that children forget, or their parents rather, forget why they're doing it. And I think that kind of grassroots idea of using your body, thinking about what you're doing, about those lessons of respect, they sometimes get lost. The flip side is, in the sort of developing world, is you've got a different set of problems. You've got real life issues. You've got to carve out a time for sport within that. That somebody's got to provide facilities, somebody's got to provide coaches, somebody's got to provide, the equipment. And I think if we can talk in this kind of panel at a very kind of glib level, a very basic level, and say, oh, sport's great. Well, sport is great. Sport's also got lots of negative points, but that grassroots point is critical. Clearly, having a child in a rich city like Seoul, Boston, Dublin, wherever, playing sport is relatively easy. Are they engaged? Are they thinking what they're doing? And that is a completely different set of questions to what does the child who is a refugee from Syria, how are they approaching it? Why are they doing it? And I think that kind of whole idea of finding that space within the mass media, I don't think it's time pressures there's different reasons why we're all sort of time poor. But I think the key thing is, as educators, as the students here, when they go out into the world and they use sport as a tool, it's giving it meaning is the critical thing. Number one, it should just be fun. I mean, why is sport so popular? It's good fun. Simple. It's fun to run, it's fun to kick. There's that lesson, but then it's the idea of what else are you doing? You're playing with people you might not normally know, from different religions, different races, different parts of the city, different parts of the country, and get those kind of messages in the background. And critically, and I think one thing we haven't talked about, a lot of initiatives around sport are based on youth, and that's a good thing, and that's obvious because they're clear-minded and we can get them young. The critical fall-off in every country is between the ages of 12 to 14 when children stop playing sport. We've also got to take that through and remind the 16-year-old, the 20-year-old, the 24-year-old that sport is good fun and it has all these other messages. And that's the battle with the mass media, to keep people active and stop them becoming the person who just watches.
I think basically, like as we presented even in Malaysia, we face the problem of getting youth to participate more in sports. And I think that is an issue faced by developed nations and developing nations, probably because of as you mentioned, the effects of the mass media and the effects of gadgets and all that. So what we see is that even within such a small country like Malaysia, there are this disparity in terms that on the rural area, you'd have no problem of youth, participating in sports, because like that is their entertainment. So, in the evenings, in the mornings, all of them will go out and participate. But the youth in cities, as in Seoul, as in, Singapore, basically they are all attached to the gadgets. So this is an issue we have to face, because no matter what, the future is with the gadgets and with the youth. So, like it or not, we have to accept that. So now is how do we actually attract the youth through the gadgets to participate in sports. So I think through this, we can see that some government in Southeast Asia, for example, Singapore, they have a very unique way of addressing this issue by creating the platform and an app in the handphones. So that means, it's an app whereby youth go in and they download it, upload it, and through every exercise that they make, every maybe 10,000 steps of walk or every 5 kilometers that they run, they'll get rewarded. So in fact, in Malaysia, we're also starting to do that. One of our states in Malaysia do that actually. So you have to attract them, because it doesn't no longer work in the conventional way where you call them and they come and exercise and play ball. You have to attract them through the gadgets that they use. And with that, you relate it with the sports that they are interested in, perhaps football, perhaps tennis, and in some ways, they will sweat it out in order to get whatever it is there is.
Bringing it back to sports and its power to heal and to engage the youth. I mean, on our panel here, we have two, Miss Maya and also from Sri Lanka. You actually lived through conflict and you were able to experience directly, firsthand, the power of sports, and you chose to pursue that path as well in what you do with your NGO and what you are pursuing now. So I'd like for you to share your personal stories, how sport helped you survive those. You said you're turning 38 and all your life you lived in conflict, and also what prompted you to go from math to pursue sports as a DTM here as well. So could you share your personal experience and how sports affected you?
I think that we can't forget that the reason of one of the reason because the children go to war is because they need recognition. The recognition is very, very important to children. And when you give an arm to the children, they feel power. Yeah? And not only for economics reasons, the people go to war, the children and go to the war, but for other reasons as recognitions. And sport they give an opportunity to get the recognition in a positive way. And I think it's what you can change the rifle for the ball the children prefer to be there. And I think that it is very, very, very effective way, because when I start with the work in the territories, we ask for what is the way to reach to the population, with the people in the territories, because the peace is not only the silence of the rifles. The peace is more than it poses in the territories with actors. And when you go to the territories, you can see that they need recognitions. And I think that this is more the more important thing that I think that, for example, the illicit group give to the children. Is they lost the trust, they lost the confidence, and the sport involve the children in other things, in other way to see the world, and I think that is very important for this reason.
Mr. Sivaraja, if you'd like to share your experience.
Yeah, well, actually, this is the week 23 years ago. As one of the person among the 500 people, the displacement happened in Sri Lanka on the 30th of October 1995. I'm very emotional and very honored to be here. Actually, the walk was to walk for our life, walk for our peaceful life. Then, like, very accidentally, sport came across in my life. I chose sports as a tool, and today I'm very peaceful to be in Korea and today talk about the sports for peace. I'm so happy about that. Actually, during my childhood, I was born in the war. I was grown up in the war. I miss my best friends. I miss my seniors and all assassinated in front of me in the school. I saw them. It was so emotional to me. Even like you have highlighted one of the soldiers, one of the guy, he was holding the hockey stick and he was assassinated the same way. One of my soldiers, he was wearing the karate belt and he was just going outside. Normally, the Sri Lankan army at the time, they told us, like, you can't wear the belt because normally the rebel groups, they put the weapons here. So they said, like, you cannot. He was wearing the karate belt. He was killed at the time. So these kind of things actually motivated me to, like, take it as a sports as a tool. And you have to show that, like, it can bring the peace back to my home. And I have to show it to my country, make the peace and all. So eventually, when I entered to the university, so I picked up the sports. So before that, I never practiced the sports. So the war ended in 2009. So after like 3, 4, 5 years, we had an opportunity to go to Colombo, the southern part of Sri Lanka, to participate in the national level sports activity. This is the very first time I'm going to the Colombo, of course. Genuinely speaking, like, I'm from the northern area, the Tamil, and the war between the Tamil and the Sinhalese community. I'm sorry, my dear Sinhalese friends are here. This is my true feeling. At the time, I thought that the Sinhalese are my enemies because they were fighting against us and we were fighting against them. But it's changed on the championship. We never expected that. It was my first event in the hurdles, so when I was running, I became the first. It was a fantastic achievement for me. Then I saw the pavilion, they all gave me the standing ovation. At the time, they gave me the great respect. That the respect, actually, they made me to love them. So now, I never think that they are my enemies. I love them. I even invited my Sinhalese friends here, and they are in front of me here. I really love them, and I wanted to make this peace back to Sri Lanka. So you ask about why you dropped this mathematics and came into this sports. This is the reason I came to the sports. Like before that, we really fought for between these two communities because of the discrimination between Tamils and Sinhalese. I think I'm a very good example. Like people, they said that if you are a Tamil person, you cannot go to the top level in any other administrative level in Sri Lanka. Actually, last year I was selected as one of the provisional national course director in National Olympic Committee. I'm serving. I'm very proud of that. Very fortunately, like this year, our president is a Tamil guy of National Olympic Committee. It's the very, very first time. So there are many Tamil national team players also there. So I am here insisting that, like as Professor Kang, he wanted to like confirm that the sports reduce the tension. So another good example, when I was in the childhood, actually we could not do any activities. Even university closed, the schools closed for 8 months, and also the curfew. The curfew for about 6 months, and only three hours per day they release it. So during the 3 hours, you have to go to the shop and buy the stuff, and you have to live inside the home. You cannot go even outside. Anytime the bomb blast happened, glymer attack happened, and a bomber attack happened. So the soldiers said that you should not go outside. So we always keep inside. What we did at that time, we could participate, we could play only carom, chess, ludo. The people, they say that these are not sports. They are kidding about that. But at that time, those are my sports. These sports really reduced my tension that time. So as a person coming from the rural area, and really proud of that, like today I'm really feeling the peace through this peace forum as well.
Well, recently we joined the Football for Peace program. One of the speakers mentioned about it, about maybe 4 students from our program. In August this year, we joined the Football for Peace program. And this program was founded by Brighton University, and here in Korea, they are working with the Korean Sharing movement. So this program is trying to use football to help bring about peace in cross-community areas where there are conflicts. And my experience so far in this program, I think, has been very encouraging. What we are doing is that we are using football to teach young kids here in Korea about values which can help them develop the peace, so which can help them have peace in the future with other people in case they have conflict. So we teach them values such as neutrality, inclusion, equity, equality, respect, and personally I believe that these are the values we need to teach in these kids, because for us to attain the peace that we want to attain, I think it needs to start with these children. They are the future generation. So if we can change their mindset, I believe that even the way they'll be looking at other nations which they might consider to be their enemies will be very different. And we have really seen it, that the mindset of the kids is changing. So this program has worked in different countries where there are conflicts. It has worked here in the Gambia, it has worked in South Sudan, in Northern Ireland, which was already mentioned, and the Republic of Ireland. And we hope that this program can continue, and that it can help continue developing the peace between South Korea and North Korea. So it has been a good experience.
We heard from some of our other presenters as well about the role that the IOC and international sports organizations played in sort of bringing together the teams of the 2 Germanys, recognizing Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland. I'm not sure if it was positive or negative, maybe a little bit of both. What role does the IOC have a clear-cut sort of strategy or sort of policy when it comes to these like divided countries, or is it something that's also constantly evolving as well? When you look back on the Pyeongchang Olympic Games, let's just use the Pyeongchang Games because they're immediate. How does the IOC assess its role in having in bringing sort of promoting peace on the Korean Peninsula?
I feel sort of being put on the spot.
Yes, I meant to put you on the spot there. Sorry.
To answer, I can't answer on behalf of the International Olympic Committee. I'm just a member. I'm not on the executive board. But I think when the IOC looked at the opportunity presented to have a unified team, much like it did in 2000, we were very, very supportive of that principle and that opportunity. So using the Pyeongchang Games, looking at the opportunity to come in as a unified team, are all things that we would all be very happy to support and see. I would say what is amazing about the Olympics is opening ceremony, everybody comes in behind their flag. Closing ceremonies, they come in all together. And that is, I think, the essence of what, to me, the Olympics is about. You come in to represent your country, you leave representing the world. And I think that's a unique opportunity to get people from all walks of life, from all parts of the world, every continent, living together, learning together, building those friendships and having that respect. So in that light, I know that there was a lot of work that President Bach did to try and help promote the opportunities for both North Korea to participate and the support of the not just coming in behind one flag, but also allowing to have unified teams. And I think we'd love to see more of that. I think this is using power of sports to help solve problems to avoid. I mean, look at the Olympic truce, and it was mentioned by one of the players. Every Games, the UN takes a resolution on the Olympic truce. And it was no difference in Pyeongchang. And people stop fighting. The agreement is you stop hostilities for the duration of the Games and also for the time it takes for people to travel to the Games and to return home. Now, it's amazing for me that if we can do that for 16 days, why can't we do it for longer? You know, it's ironic that every 4 years, for 16 days, the world, for the most part, agrees that we will stop fighting. If we can do it for 16 days, why can't we do it for longer? It just baffles me.
Did the IOC or do the the international sports organizations, could they help in post-conflict Ireland? Did they help? Could they have done more? You mentioned how there was some confusion over the recognition of sports or over the recognition of countries.
The problem for the IOC and FIFA is world politics is complex. Conflicts are complex. So, I mean, a very quick example. In Northern Ireland, as part of the peace deal, each citizen can choose its nationality. If you feel Protestant and British, you go and get a British passport. If you feel Catholic and Irish, you go down to Dublin and you get an Irish passport. And that allows the two communities to wear their own nationality. FIFA in 2002 is worried about a global transfer market in soccer of people changing nationalities for gain of nations kind of utilising footballing talent, so it made a very simple rule. It said when a squad of 24 players arrives at an international tournament, we need to see 24 identical passports. 24 German passports, 24 South Korean passports, whatever it may be. At which point half the Northern Irish squad said, if you make us have British passports, we're never playing again. So FIFA had to run around and put a little asterisk next to the rule and said this rule does not apply to Northern Irish players who can have a British or Irish passport. And I think, again, it's that complexity that you have fluid geopolitics, you have wars, you have conflicts, and so on and so forth, that when you start describing something like the conflict in Sri Lanka, you know, why should a sports administrator in Zurich or Lausanne get their head around that? You know, it's deep, complex historical questions. And I think we've got to give sports bodies a break sometimes and say, you know what, they get it wrong. And sometimes they are misguided and muddle-headed, but educate them as well. And then when you have new nations come on stream, or you have, the rights of indigenous people, you have gender issues, you have religious issues, all these complexities. Oh, and just be a team and get on with and enjoy it. We've just got to actually, as administrators in sport at the national and international level, actually be alert and be aware and take information so that what you do is positive. It is about peace. It's about moving forward. It doesn't complicate matters.
You said that the people of the two Germanys had more interaction than we do have here, but there's also the cultural divide. There is also, ideological divides as well, that once you have unification, could sport play a role in bringing the peoples together, in bringing them together, a little bit more unity?
I mentioned in my paper that in comparison with Korea, you cannot imagine how close the ties, despite the formal separation of the two states, were. There were every day people met in business, people could travel. It was a little bit difficult to get the permission and so on, but it was difficult, and this was different. We in sport or in science or in art, we were at the moment when the wall was falling down. We could continue and we were free. We had not these problems. The only problems we had were economic problems, and of course the mentality of the East East Germans, who had to live 50 years under the Soviet system. They had a different mentality, but not like here. Here it is very, very different.
In this Pyeongchang Winter Olympic game, only one women ice hockey team is unified. And the International Federation Ice Hockey blocked the rule. The 22 is all right. 22 people participate, but the North Korea and South Korea ability is different. So, International Ice Hockey Federation approved 35 players together. And when we choose the war or peace, we must choose the peace, break a little rule. And that is very important, I think.
The unified women's ice hockey team, that actually was criticized by a lot of young people here in Korea who felt that these young players, especially the South Korean players, had been sacrificed for this political purpose, this political sort of propaganda, as it were. And they felt that they were being unfairly treated. So there was quite a lot of negative feelings toward that. I understand that it changed among the players as well. It became more positive, I think, after the games, when there was this more conducive, maybe, atmosphere of peace. But I don't know. What was your take on that? And maybe, Dr. Nagi, you can start off, but other panelists, if you would like to weigh in on that, what did you think of that? Using the sport, using this team to convey a point, an important point, but was it actually useful?
It's just a very quick point that I think when people looked at the talent question, as it were, why has half the South Korean team been thrown overboard? They've trained for years, they're not going to get their moment. At the kind of notion of how we look at elite sport, everybody said that's a crying shame for them. But I think it's that innate contradiction that, the byline we all work under is sport is not political, which is just nonsense. Sport is entirely political. Sport will be used for political means at the grassroots level, at the elite level, wherever it may be. A political decision was made around the Korean ice hockey team, which had a feel-good factor, which sent an international message, which sent a domestic message. It was propaganda. And fair play. I haven't got a problem with that. But then don't start boo-hooing about the athletes. Athletes know what they sign up to. They know how they're used. And that's always been the way, and that's not going to change. And I think it is, it's a slightly different issue. I mean, it's a whole issue with black athletes taking the knee during the American anthem in the NFL, etc. The NFL are lost in how do you respond to the overt politicization of sport. Sport's political. You've got to deal with it, and I think it goes back to the question of, be it the IOC, be it FIFA, be it a National Olympic Committee. People are in charge, are going to make political decisions to use sport for their own ends, good and bad. But we've just got to, I think the thing is we need to acknowledge that. And I think anybody who graduates from this program or any other program who goes out into the world and says ever, sport is not political, you're doing yourself a disservice and you're lying. Your first comment has got to be, sport is entirely political. How do I harness its power?
It will be very difficult for me to try to summarize what was discussed through the presentations throughout the day and also the discussion. I think what we can agree on is that sports and politics are intertwined. It would be unrealistic and very naive to try to deny that. And in both ways, sports and politics can influence each other for good and bad. And I think it's up to us administrators, those of us who love sport, as spectators, as practitioners of sport, to be aware of that, and to maybe at the most essential part is to practice it and to encourage our youth to practice sport at a very young age so that it teaches us the life lessons, it teaches us the ethics and what we need to live in a more tolerant world. So I'm not sure that I was able to do justice to all of our presenters and speakers, but I hope that this will spark some more discussions and also insights as well. So would you please give our presenters and speakers a big round of applause for their contribution?